What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another video. I thought I would do something a little different today and talk about I want to start doing a series of videos talking about different units in Age of Sigmar. What are their strengths? What are their weaknesses? Do I like them? And then at the end, I'm going to give them a fun little rating on like a sort of a tier scale. Okay. So the first unit I want to talk about is the Screaming Bell. It's one of my favorite units of all time. It recently got a fairly significant points drop. It went down, I think, 50 points in the last GHB. And so the question is it worth it now? This is a very complicated unit, and if you just looked at its pluses, it would be way too good, right? If you just looked at like the different aspects of it that are strong, and you didn't look at any of the aspects that are quite weak, um, then you might kind of say to yourself, this thing is completely overpowered. But I don't think that's the case. I'll kind of get to my thoughts at the end. But let's talk about the Screaming Bell, or the Gray Seer on Screaming Bell. So if you look at the top here, it is a behemoth. It is a leader. And so that means that you are limited to 4 behemoths, and it fills out both categories, by the way. And which is, this is the same for everything, but I just have to point it out. Now, I actually don't think this is a big deal in Skaven because we don't have that many behemoth units. We're basically looking at the Screaming Bell, and we're looking at the Rat Ogres or Vermin Lords. Now, you're not going to have too many of any of those things, likely, especially as right now the Hell Pit Abomination is not super good. But but that is something that we need to mention, right? It's 15 wounds, which is a lot of wounds. Its movement characteristic is based on its chart, which we'll get to in a moment. It has a 4-up save and 6 bravery. Now, I want to talk about a couple of things. So the wounds went up. Originally, it was 12 wounds in AOS 1, and then in the last book, I believe it was 13 wounds. I'm pretty sure it was 13 wounds. The 4-up save has never changed. The bravery is something new in Age of Sigmar. So back in fantasy days, anything that kind of climbs on this bell that's crazy enough was in that unit was like unbreakable. It was just like, it's the altar of the horned rat, right? So like the Manglers, the Loon Boss on Manglers, I think they should have a bravery of 10. I legitimately think this is actually something that Games Workshop kind of made a mistake on almost. The Plague Furnace has a bravery of 10, and this is the altar of their god. So fix it, GW. That's kind of a little pet peeve. 280 points though, but it does make a difference though, by the way, because if you're trying to roll below a 6 or below, it's a lot more difficult if you're trying to do heroic recovery. So that's kind of a big deal. And even before we had to deal with that kind of thing, I just thought it was silly because it is their altar. Okay, now let's go on and see some of the stats, and we'll kind of look at some of the positives and some of the negatives here. So its melee profile is nothing to write home about. 3 attacks at a 2-inch range from the Gray Seer on top. I'm not sure why it has a 2-inch reach. I'm fine with that, obviously, but it's 4s and 4s -1 D3 damage. So in all likelihood, it doesn't do anything because 4s and 4s is awful. Tearing Claws and Fangs from the Rat Ogre. 4 attacks. This is its best profile. 4s and 3s -1 rend 2 damage, right? The Rat Ogre has a much longer reach than the Gray Seer. I guess he's swinging around on that bell, but whatever, right? And then at full health, you have 6 attacks, and then as low as 3 attacks from the Rusty Spikes. 3s and 3s -1 damage, right? So, I guess you could argue that this is a little bit better because when you're doing all-out attack. And this is not a monster, by the way, which we will see at the end. I did add the keywords. This is a pretty good profile, actually, but just because it's a little more reliable. It doesn't rely on all-out attack or something like that as much. But anyway, so it has the traditional 0 to 6 wounds suffered, and then the move characteristic starts out at 6 inches. Now we'll look at that in just a moment because we have this thing on the right here. But the most important thing and one of the strongest aspects of the Screaming Bell is on the right here, which is the +2 to casting at full health. Avalanche of Energy, it's called. And you get +1 to chanting because it can become a priest. It's such a weird little thing. But it has 2 casts, and it can't take any prayers from these. It can't take any general prayers like curse, and it can't take any prayers from the Skaven battle tome. So I've never done this before. I could see doing it like when you've got like no spells that you want to cast, which seems unlikely. And I'll talk about it in a minute, but like I think there's a good reason. There's a way to take the Screaming Bell and make it like more attractive than it is from just the base profile. But I've never actually made it a priest because I just like without you can just basically do bless or smite at that, and then it's just not really worth it to me. Anyway, it is a 2 cast wizard, 2 unbinds. It does have a mount, which is super important in Skaven because it means that it can't scurry away instead of fighting, which is really, really good. Like that's something you really want, and it does not have access to it. And then the most important thing, one of the biggest weaknesses on it, is its pushed into battle rule, which means it cannot move unless it starts a move within six inches. That's 6 inches of 10 or more other friendly Skaven models. Now, I believe this has changed. I believe in the first one, it didn't say other, so you needed 9 models because you included the model itself as one of those models. We've kind of talked about it on the channel before, but the Daughters of Cain, same thing. It's like it used to be you have to be pushed into battle in fantasy days, and for some reason it doesn't need it, even though we've got this giant rat ogre that could be doing like the Fred Flintstone thing on the side and just using its paws to kind of push it along. Doesn't make any sense to me, but whatever. This is like the biggest This is probably the biggest weakness of the of this war scroll because you can't move it unless you have another unit nearby. So that's basically a tax that you need to add on to it. So even though this war scroll says 280 points, and I have it written really big at the top there, it really is 380 points because you need at least a unit of clan rats kind of hanging out, chilling nearby, and then clan rats can take a couple of wounds and still push this thing around. That's another tax. It's not mobile on its own, and it can't move, pile in, do literally anything without a unit nearby. It's such a huge weakness that it's very hard to overcome. We will talk about, or actually, I guess I'll talk about it right now. So there's a kind of another tax that I would add on to this as well, other than the pushed into battle clan rats, and that is an endless spell. Because the spell that it comes on as War Scroll, which we'll see in a moment, isn't anything to write home about. You can use it obviously to get off Skitter Leap or Death Frenzy, but you're not getting the most out of it at that point because it can cast 2 spells, and +2 is a big deal, right? So I think the way to get the most out of this model is by adding a good endless spell that you want rampaging around, particularly like a high cast one like Purple Sun, because it's hard for people to unbind it and it's easier for the Grey Seer. So the Grey Seer is a good candidate for that. I wouldn't say you necessarily need to bring Purple Sun specifically, but even something like Gnashing Jaws, Ravenix Gnashing Jaws, or the swords, something like that will add more value to it. Now that is a further tax. You're talking at least 60 points if we're talking about the silver swords as they exist right now. And again, these are points as they exist right now as of the current GHB in March of 2023. So yeah, this is a way of getting more out of it, but then you go from 280 to 380 with the clan rats, and then +60, we're looking at 440 to really get the most out of this unit, right? So now there are more rules that we need to discuss, but yeah, you kind of see where I'm looking at it from here, guys. So the Peel of Doom has changed in the new Battle Tome, or it's not that new, it's like a year old at this point, but still. The Peel of Doom used to be where you rolled 2d6, and this was really good because you tended to get the dice rolls, you're most of the time you're rolling toward the middle, you're getting 7s or around there, so you were used to get these good effects that are quite common, right? Now you just roll 1d6 at the start of your hero phase. So you can't do this after you cast, but most people don't really care. It's not that big a deal, but you know, hey, right? Like, I think the idea is that if you do roll a 1 and it would have killed itself with the D3 mortal wounds, then you wouldn't have gotten to do those spells, which is why they make you do it at the start. But I don't, unless that you're on a couple wounds and that happens and he doesn't roll the after save, then I guess you could go back and anyway, you are technically supposed to do it at the start of the hero phase. So number 1, magical backlash. So you roll a d6, and if you get a 1, you just take d3 mortal wounds. Now this seems like it's like, ugh, so 1 and 6, I take d3 mortal wounds. Well, this isn't actually a bad thing, and a lot of people, including Mr. Vince Venturella from Warhammer Weekly, would argue that this is the thing you're hoping for. Now, I know that sounds crazy, but bear with me for a little bit longer. We're going to go through the rest of these first. Unholy Clamor adds 6 inches to the move characteristic until the next hero phase. This isn't that bad, but you keep in mind that the clan rats that are pushing it need to be nearby, and they kind of need to be behind it or to the side of it, because otherwise, if you move the clan rats first, they will be out of range to actually push the damn thing, right? So this could be good if you do have clan rats nearby and you want to jet over onto an objective, and you could even run the thing so you're moving 12 inches at full health plus d6, or even plus, you could move it 18 inches theoretically, as long as it starts near some clan rats, but good luck keeping up with them, right? Then if you roll a 3, Wall of Unholy Sound. Until your next hero phase, subtract 1 from hit rolls for attacks made by enemy units within 13 inches. So this is not as good as it used to be. It used to be 26-inch range, so double this. And it used to be easier to get. So it is a good one, though. Like, if you throw it up the battlefield and then you can get them in range of this -1 to hit bubble. But with all out attack and all these other ways of adding plus to hit, it really isn't as strong as it used to be. But it's one of the better ones for sure. Deafening Peals. Until your next hero phase, roll a dice each time a model is picked to issue a command while it's within 13 inches of Screaming Bell, which you roll this result in this phase. On a 5+, that command cannot be issued. So basically, if someone tries to do like all-out defense or whatever, if they're within 13 inches of the Screaming Bell, which isn't super easy, as we've discussed, you can roll a dice on a 5 up. It just doesn't get to do that. That's pretty good, but it's random, so it's not like you can count on it. But sometimes it might come in super handy, right? Screaming Crescendo. Until the next hero phase, after this unit makes a charge move, you can pick one enemy unit within 1 inches, and on a 2 up, it suffers d6 mortal wounds. Like, hey, not bad, but again, it has movement issues. I'm not sure how good I think this is. And then Apocalyptic Doom. Until at the end of this hero phase, roll a dice for each enemy unit. So this is end of the hero phase, so it's not like you can move it and get this, and it used to be within 26 inches. You roll 4 up and they suffer d3 mortal wounds. I think this is supposed to be the best one because it's on a 6, but it's not. This, I would probably argue, is the worst, because it's just so random and it's 13 inches. But anyway, this is the Peel of Doom has really gone down, and it's a lot less fun than it used to be, but it is what it is. We have new rules, and that rule is that kind of replaces some of the funner mechanics. It's called a Stirring Beyond the Veil. Once per battle at the start of the hero phase, if 7 or more wounds have been allocated to this unit, you can say that the Grey Seer will shatter the Screaming Bell. If you do so, roll a dice. On a 1, this unit is destroyed. So you just lose the unit. You got a 1 in 6 chance to just blow the thing up, right? On any other roll, add the number of wounds allocated to the unit to the roll. If the modified roll is 12 or less, the Screaming Bell is shattered. If it's 13 or more, you basically just get a free Vermin Lord and set it up wholly within 13 inches of the unit. It can be set up within 3 inches if this unit is within 3 inches of an enemy unit. So that's pretty crazy, but it's not super likely, because the strategy, if you are facing the Screaming Bell, that people tend to pick is they tend to kill the unit pushing it around, so then it can't move around, and then they tend to just ignore the Screaming Bell. If it's not on an objective and it's just casting like 1 or 2 spells per turn, it's just really not that much of a threat. It doesn't have a shooting attack. It's just kind of a waste of space and it can do stuff. It can deny, 30 inches out, obviously, and it has access. If you give it the right command trait, you can be re-rolling your spells and your unbinds, which is pretty good. But like, yeah. So, if you have 7 wounds on it, and then you roll a 6 is what you need to get a free Vermin Lord, right? Because you need to get to 13. So you want to be taking as many wounds as possible, but without it dying. And that's just not, like that's just not an easy thing to guarantee. Your opponent could just get him down to like 5 or 6 wounds one turn, and then you can't roll for that, and then they just come in there and they either destroy it or they just ignore the darn thing. You know what I mean? Anyway, yeah, it could be fun if it just weren't so full of strategic holes, I think, is the bottom line. Crack's Call is the spell that it gets. Casting value of 6, range of 13 inches. I think it used to be 18 inches, so it's gone down again. You pick one enemy unit within range and visible to the caster. Roll 2d6. If it's greater than the move characteristic, you suffer a number of mortal wounds equal to the difference between the moves. So you're rolling 7 on average, right? And then the average move in the game is 6 inches. So on average, you're doing 1 mortal wound at 13 inches. It really isn't great unless you're facing, a unit with a very slow move characteristic. And overall, it's just not great. So that's why I kind of think you need to take both a good spell from the lore, either Death Frenzy or Skitter Leap. And you can't Skitter Leap this unit either, by the way, because that's, it's over the amount of wounds that you can Skitter Leap something, which I believe is 13. So yeah, it's just full of these kinds of holes, right? So the final grade I'm giving this thing is a C+. It is a totem, which gives it 18-inch range on its command abilities and such. But because it has a mount, because of its points, because of how the Peel of Doom works now, because it doesn't have a great War Scroll spell, because it can't move on its own, and that includes pile-in or charge, it's takeable. But I don't think it's good, and I don't think it's even average good. Like, I can't even give it a B. Like, B is what I would call something that situationally, half the time is quite good and usable. Whereas this thing, most of the time, if you're facing a competent opponent, it's very difficult to get your value out of it. And that's not even including the tax of having more things on there that you need to bring, a la clan rats and possibly an endless spell to get the most out of it. Most of the time, you're not going to waste command traits, I should even say. I would go so far as to say you're not going to waste command traits or probably even artifacts on this thing, because like you could take the Skaven Master of Magic, which is really good, except for the fact that you've got other options out there like Devious Adversary and such that are so good on the Vermin Lords that I just don't see taking this thing ever. Taking a command trait on this thing. So anyway, that's what I'm giving it. I know situationally you can make use out of it, and I'm not saying that it's not takeable. Not takeable would be a D or an F. Yeah, let's say F. C+, it's takeable and it is situationally good. And if you roll well, this thing can actually feel overpowered. Like if you roll well and you face someone who just like does the right amount of mortal wounds to it and you get a free Vermin Lord, then this thing is absolutely incredible. And if you're rolling the right thing every time on your Peel of Doom and you bring a spell off that does a bunch of damage, this thing can seem super good. But against a strong opponent, and certainly in a tournament, I just would never take it. But what do you guys think? Maybe you disagree. I would love to hear your thoughts, your opinions. Shout them out down below, and let me know if you want to see this kind of content, this kind of analytical, let's pick a unit and look at it style content. If you do, please subscribe and let me know in the comments. I'd really appreciate the feedback. And until next time, we'll see you guys. Have fun.